Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply unsettling mystery hidden right in plain sight. When we think of the natural world, we usually picture this perfectly balanced system, right? A predator hunts, the prey tries to escape, and survival just continues. It's a system driven purely by need. But what happens when we look closely at animals that seem to kill for reasons entirely beyond survival? We're going to explore a really disturbing question today, pulling from documented scientific observations that challenge pretty much everything we thought we knew about animal psychology. In nature, most predators operate on a very strict biological budget. They hunt to eat, to defend their territory, or to protect their young. It's all about survival. But that raises a massive question. What if survival isn't always the reason? What happens when a species develops such high cognitive function, such advanced intelligence, that it actually changes the very rules of hunting itself? When an animal's brain is complex enough to problem solve and communicate and form deep social bonds, it turns out their motivations for violence might become just as complex. And this leads us to a concept that, honestly, scientists are still really struggling to explain. We are looking at creatures that extinguish life not out of a gnawing hunger and not out of a desperate need for defense. Instead, they engage in behaviors that look dangerously close to, well, enjoyment. Now, it's incredibly difficult to measure enjoyment in an animal, but when you completely strip away hunger and survival, what exactly is left? This is the dark anomaly we're decoding today, violence that seems totally untethered from biological necessity. Let's look at Section 1, the perfect image, an unlikely suspect. Okay, let's build a profile here. We're talking about an animal famously known for its highly intelligent, incredibly social, and friendly nature. They're universally beloved. I mean, there are countless stories of them actually saving human lives at sea. They play joyfully in massive social groups, and they communicate with a level of emotional depth that literally fascinates researchers worldwide. You already know who we're talking about, the dolphin. They basically have the ultimate pristine public relations image in the entire animal kingdom. But hidden just beneath that universally beloved public image, way out of sight of your standard wildlife documentary, is a completely different reality. Researchers have been quietly documenting behaviors that totally challenge every single positive assumption we make about dolphins. The ocean's friendliest face actually hides a deeply complex and sometimes incredibly violent psyche. Which brings us to Section 2, the conflicting behavior, shattering the illusion. These aren't just isolated, one-off incidents either. Researchers have heavily documented cases of dolphins violently attacking smaller marine animals like porpoises and simply leaving them. There's no consumption. No feeding takes place at all. They engage in repeated, unprovoked interspecies aggression. We also see coordinated group attacks that end without a meal, and behaviors that researchers classify as practice hunting. They're expending massive amounts of energy to kill, but entirely skipping the biological reward of eating. This disturbing pattern raises a huge question that scientists are actively debating right now. Is this actually hunting, or is it something else entirely? Is this just a harsh way of learning survival skills, or is high intelligence actively driving a complex form of violence? When you have an animal that doesn't need to hunt to survive in that specific moment, yet chooses to do it anyway, you enter this gray area of behavioral psychology that makes a scientific community deeply uncomfortable. So, how do we explain this? Let's look at one of the leading ideas, the play theory. Some theories suggest that we shouldn't view this as evil. Instead, for dolphins, the act of hunting can sometimes morph into play. It becomes a social activity that bonds the pod together. It might act as a live-fire training exercise for younger members, or it serves as a brutal dominance display to establish hierarchy. The killing is just a byproduct of social posturing and cognitive stimulation. But look, regardless of whether we label it play, or practice, or dominance, the outcome remains exactly the same. A life is taken without any immediate survival necessity. And when a human being watches an intelligent creature extinguish another life simply for social bonding or stimulation, it looks uncomfortably like pleasure to our eyes. It completely blurs the line between a biological imperative and a psychological desire. Let's move to Section 3, not just dolphins, a deeper layer of intelligence. Because it turns out, this isn't just a fluke. Similar, terrifying patterns appear across multiple highly intelligent species. Big cats, like lions and leopards, are frequently observed toying with their prey, prolonging the hunt long after the catch is totally secured. Orcas, closely related to dolphins, are famous for practicing hunting techniques on seals or birds, treating them way more like sport than sustenance.
And when we look at our closest relatives, primates like chimpanzees, we see intense, coordinated social violence within groups that goes far beyond basic survival. This proves it's a systemic trait of advanced intelligence in nature.
That leads to Section 4, the interpretation problem, human emotion versus instinct. There is a massive psychological trap we all fall into here. When humans watch a dolphin kill a porpoise for fun or a cat toy with a mouse, our human brains immediately jump to words like cruelty, enjoyment, and malicious intention. We project our own psychology right onto the animal. But nature's reality operates on a completely different frequency. What looks like sadistic pleasure to us is likely a cold, calculated mix of deeply ingrained instinct, learning, survival programming, and social dominance. Nature doesn't feel guilt, and it definitely doesn't view violence through a moral framework.
Which brings us to this really vital quote from the source material. Nature does not follow human morality. There is no concept of good or evil. We have to completely remove the idea of human morality, of heroes and villains from the equation. If we want to even begin to understand the psychology behind these advanced predators, we must accept that behavior is shaped only by survival, intelligence, and instinct. They aren't committing crimes. They're simply executing incredibly complex biological programs. So the real mystery we're left with isn't a moral one at all. It isn't whether animals are good or evil. The true question is, what happens when intelligence itself breaks the rules of survival? What happens when an animal's brain becomes so advanced that it needs stimulation, play, and dominance so badly that it will actually take a life just to satisfy those cognitive urges? It suggests that the smarter an animal gets, the less bound it is by the simple rules of hunger. The line between survival and pleasure, between instinct and intention, is incredibly thin. When you look at a dolphin, an orca, or a primate, you aren't just looking at a survivor. You're looking at a deeply complex, unpredictable mind. So we are left with one final, deeply unsettling question. If intelligence itself can override basic survival to create behaviors that look just like cruelty, do we really understand the minds of the animals we share this planet with?